Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1971 film The Devil with Seven Faces, and I feel like the title's pretty misleading because there's no devil. I don't think there's seven faces that you can count anywhere. Well, I mean, amongst the cast, yes, but seven cases involved in the, intrigue that's going on with the film. I thought for sure when I saw it, I was like, ooh, Carol Baker's in this, George Hilton is in this. I'm like, maybe some good Giallo, maybe a good time, because up until now, and this will tell you how I feel about this film, I've liked all the films I've seen Carol Baker in. I've liked all the films I've seen George Hilton in to varying degrees, but I've liked them all to some degree. This one, not so good. It's certainly not a giallo film. I need to throw that out there. Maybe a little bit inspired by German krimi films to a degree, but barely. It's not very giallo-y. The only thing is, it's got a mystery to it. There's no one getting killed. It's about this diamond heist, basically, and, Julie being stalked, who we find out at the end is actually Mary. So the question then becomes, where was Julie all of this time anyway? And also, was Julie an actual person? Or was it some photo trickery that showed the twins, Julie and Mary? We don't know. Or if you do know, actually put it in the comments. Anyway, directed by Osvaldo Civirani, who also directed Forbidden Temptations, The Beckett Affair, Return of Django, Summer Love, and Voodoo Sexy, just to name a few. Oh, also I do want to say that I'm reviewing this, it's not a giallo film, but I'm reviewing it anyway, because I'm working through all of the films that have English dubs or English subtitles on Giallo Realm YouTube channel. So even though it's called Giallo Realm, not everything on there is Giallo, but I will review it if I can watch it and understand it. Anyway, written by Civirani and Tito Carpi. Now, Tito Carpi's written scripts for 105 films. He has 105 writing credits on IMDb, which is cool, including Cold Eyes of Fear, Seven Murders for Scotland Yard, which I will be reviewing. I don't think it's the next one I'm going to review. I think it's the one after that. Jungle Holocaust, Tentacles, The Shark Hunter, and Alien from the Deep. Some of those sound pretty fun. And if you've seen them, let me know. Are they worth it in the comments? Obviously, it stars Carol Baker, who's been in other films that I enjoyed, like Orgasmo, Knife of Ice, So Sweet, So Perverse, and A Quiet Place to Kill, which I have reviews for all of those films on my channel. You can check them out. And also George Hilton in this one, who is in The Moment to Kill, The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward, All the Colors of the Dark, The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, The Two Faces of Fear, The Case of the Bloody Iris, The Killer Must Kill Again, and My Dear Killer, which I have reviews for almost, I think, all but two of those films on my channel. I've been going hard on these older Italian films. This film is also known as The Devil Has Seven Faces instead of The Devil with Seven Faces, Nights of Terror, and Bloody Mary. I mean, how is Bloody Mary even fit? Like, I understand the Mary connection, but there's no blood whatsoever in this film. There's potentially a dead body. We're not even 100% sure. That part where Mary and, I want to say Mary and Tony are renting that house for a little bit, and the woman says she's going to take off, but then I'll call her Julie, because she's Julie at that point. Julie finds her dead in the attic, but then Tony goes up there and is like, there's nothing there, so you're kind of questioning, like, was it actually a dead body, or is Julie losing it? And that's one of the things about this film in general, is it kind of lays down this thing of, like, we assume this is Julie, yes, there's the reveal of her to be Mary in the end, but the question becomes a lot of the times, like, is someone actually coming after her, or is she losing it? Because that kind of plays a few times into there, including this thing where she's finding a body, but then Tony's like, there's no body there. So making the audience question her perspective of things to think, maybe she's not totally sane here. But then there's also that little bit when it's revealed that she has this twin, and then there's a diamond heist involved, where she's saying, oh, I must be mistaken for my twin sister, and that's why people are after me. So you're thinking it's one of those two things. But then you find out in the end, it's actually the fact that Julie is actually Mary, so people are coming after her because they know she has the diamond. So there you go. So, it's not a bad story, but the way it's executed in this film is awful, in my opinion. There's so much downtime a lot of scenes that are extended way past what they need to be. The pacing is terrible, and that's what kills it for me. I assume that Julie faints in the beginning because she was so afraid that someone was stalking her to kill her, even though it was just some dude with a camera. That sets it up as her being maybe a little bit paranoid because she's not actually being followed by someone who's trying to do anything to her. But then you also see that someone was following her for some sort of reason, so you can understand her having this kind of level of paranoia. So it is a good introduction to that character, I will say. Kind of a ridiculous jump scare with the guy playing with the prank with the gorilla mask and that gigantic knife. First of all, that knife is awesome. That was a pretty awesome knife, and I know that has a particular name for it, but I can't think of what it is at the moment. But who plays pranks like that though? Like, and who is this guy? Like, it's the only time we see this dude. And he plays this weird prank where he's got this gorilla mask and a legitimate knife that you could really hurt someone with. And it's like comically large too. It was a weird jump scare, and then this guy's gone. Never see him again. Very weird. Tony says that Julie lives in a secluded area, and this is actually done to increase the feeling of danger for Julie in the film. Because at this point, we already know she's been followed by someone. She's feeling paranoid. She said someone's after her. And then Tony and Dave go to see her at her place. And Tony's basically like, oh, you're in a pretty secluded area. So that's saying to the audience, if she needs help, if she's in trouble at some point, it's hard for her to get help because she's so secluded there. I like how Tony just starts getting involved in Dave's case with Julie when he has no expertise. Now, we find out in the end it's because he was after the diamond as well, and he knew that Julie was actually Mary. But the fact that Dave goes along with it is just ridiculous. Like, Tony shows up under this pretext that we were friends from many years ago. Hey, let's hang out. Dave then is basically like, hey, and I think Dave's an attorney. He says, something to the degree of like, I'm working this case right now. Why don't you just pal around with me? And he just lets Tony do it. And then Tony starts getting himself involved in it. And at no point is Dave like, this is a bad idea. At no point does he say, look, let me handle the job because you just showed up out of nowhere. Yes, I understand we were friends. We haven't talked in quite a while. I don't really fully know you anymore. And this isn't your job. You have no business getting involved. But he just does. But that's what happens with a lot of these films. There's a lot of like just because stuff that goes on. So Dave is not deterred by the fact that Margaret has a boyfriend, and she seems open to him, so I guess he should just kind of go for it. Now, obviously, we end up finding out that Dave was basically working the angle of romance with Margaret in order to get close enough to her to ask her questions, to gather information on Julie, and in the end, you find out that Dave did figure it out. He did figure out that Julie was actually Mary and that she had the diamond, and that's why he shows up at the end on the plane to be like, hey, give me a piece of this $1 million diamond. Let's go, because I know what's going on. So I assume he then ends up blackmailing her, basically. What Margaret tells Dave about Julie brings her perspective into question, especially when she says she comes back to the office sometimes and doesn't recognize it or acts like she doesn't recognize it. So, that actually points to two things. One, it points to kind of questioning her state of mind for the audience's sake. Two, in retrospect, at the end of the film, it brings the question up, was Julie replaced by Mary at some point? Was Julie an actual sister, like they were actual twins, and Julie was working at this office, and then one day either Julie was killed, or Julie went somewhere else, or Mary had her leave, or had her done in, I don't know. And then instead of Julie one day, it's Mary. Hence the whole idea that she shows up and it's like she doesn't recognize the office at all. That would make sense because Mary's not used to being there. So just something to think about. They make a play for the idea that Julie is being mistaken for her twin sister Mary, especially when she and Tony get jumped by the thugs. That's when we're entrenched in this idea that it's all a misunderstanding, and it's very unfortunate for Julie because Mary looks exactly like her, except in the picture their hair color was different. So I don't know. So why did Tony and Julie run from the cops? Tony also knocked one out. So in the moment, it seems very weird, and you're kind of like, why would they do this? Because they had these thugs after them. They were potentially going to kill them. They were potentially going to sexually assault Julie at that point. And then the police show up, break it up, and instead of being like, hey, we need your help or catch these guys, it was run, and Tony knocks a police officer out. So at the moment, you're like, what? And even Dave says something later, like, had you not run from the cops or knocked the guy out, you could have gotten help from the cops. I would have said, call them and get some help from them. But at the moment, it just seems like a really weird thing, and it is in the way that they present it. But in retrospect, obviously, Tony's a criminal and Julie's a criminal. So in that moment, we then understand, once we, have the full picture, that they just want to get away from the cops because they thought the cops could potentially be onto them or somehow could catch on to them. It does end up seeming that Dave is using Margaret as a source of information for what goes on with Julie at the office. And it makes it seem that Dave is suspicious of Julie. So the whole questioning line with Margaret multiple times, which they make a big point of showing, it really takes you down the path of, okay, Dave is working for Julie, but I don't think that he trusts Julie. So it is kind of open, like, it's open to interpretation of, like, do you think that he thinks that she's kind of losing it? Or do you think that he thinks that somehow she's involved in the diamond heist? And in the end, we find out that actually he was onto her and figured out that Julie was actually marrying. Solid tension when Julie's wandering around that creepy old house that she and Tony end up renting. Also, how about the gigantic flame on her lighter? Like, is that how lighters were back then? Is that how any lighters are now? I don't know, but that flame was like this. Impressive. Like, that's what I was really focused on. But in that moment, they did a good job of kind of dropping out a lot of the music as she kind of walked around, having decent sound design. And, like, a lot of technical stuff with this film was good. The acting's good, the directing's good, cinematography's pretty good. The music is pretty good. It's just, script, like I said, pacing's terrible. And a lot of the scenes just drag on for a ridiculous amount of time. Plus, there are a lot of scenes where we're just not doing much of anything that's all that important. A lot of people just going here and going there and questioning people. When Tony looks in the attic and says there's no dead body, Julie's sanity is further called into question, which I already talked about. Once the stolen diamond plot is revealed, it makes one wonder how much Julie actually knows. At that point, when they revealed that whole diamond heist plot, I did start to become suspicious of Julie, as in, how much does she know? It's her twin sister, so I assume they have some sort of relationship. Does she know about the diamond? Is she involved in it somehow? Or, like, what? Like, how involved? Is she just on the periphery of what's going on, or is she fully in the center of this thing? And by the end, we find out, obviously, she's in the center of it. What's with Julie's wacky blue wig? That's what I don't understand. When it was, like, on the beach, I think... Was that when Dave was meeting with her or Tony? I think Tony, actually. When Tony was meeting with her on the beach and she's wearing this weird blue wig... I know that, like, wigs were a thing back then in Italy, but a blue wig like that, and the fact that, like, her blonde hair was actually coming out from under the blue wig as well. So it was, like, blue and blonde hair at the same time. It's just an odd moment. They sure do stock this film with suspicious-looking people acting suspicious. All guys, by the way. Tons of thug-looking dudes that pop up here and there and just look like they're up to no good. Just by their normal appearance, look like they're no good individuals. So plenty of red herrings just being thrown out here and there. And obviously, in the end, we kind of find out all these guys are somehow involved in trying to get the diamond. So, yeah. And we know that Tony will be great at running down those guys in the car because he's actually a professional race car driver. Don't really know that was that important to the actual movie, but it does set you up to understand that when the car chase scene is going on, that he's got skills and he'll easily be able to chase people down. The end of the car chase scene looks horrible. It's a bunch of sped up shots that just look really, really bad. I'm sure a lot of people would feel me on that. It looks terrible. Those sped up shots are so bad. But I understand. This was the early 70s. that's one of the things they just did in film. That was commonly done. Well, Tony's attitude changed real quick when he discovered that fake diamond, the one that is glass, basically. And they're like, it's not even crystal. It's not even worth anything. Yeah, so Tony gets really mad because up until this point, Tony's acting like he's 100% just trying to romance Julie. And then once that shift happens in him where he's like, this is a fake diamond that I found, then you know it wasn't about being with Julie. It wasn't about actual attraction or real romantic interest. It's about getting this $1 million diamond because, hey, it's $1 million diamond. And he's a scumbag, obviously. It gets kind of comical with how long the dunking scene is, especially with the underwater shots. When Tony was dunking Julie in the bathtub, that just, I laughed at it at certain times because it just went on for so long. And then also, like, the shots from the bottom of the tub looking up at her face, it just looks funny. And it's just going on so long, it's like, this is comical at this point. But, you know, these types of films, huh? Isn't Hunter an insurance guy? Why is he killing people, and can't he work with the police? The guy who ends up saying that he was involved in insurance and he got burned because they, you know, he found out that the diamond had been stolen, but there was like a fake insurance claim put in on it or something. So I don't know. Was that just a cover and that's just something he said to the inspector and he actually is just some scumbag criminal? I don't know, because if he is an actual insurance guy like he said, why is he going around with a gun trying to solve this case himself and shooting and killing people? I'd like other people's opinion on this. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Solid reveal when you see Tony is not dead. I actually did think at that point that Tony had just died, had been shot, fell into the water, and either drowned or bled out. But he shows up, stabs that dude in the back, which I guess there is a little bit of blood in this. Like I said earlier, there wasn't, but I guess there is a little bit. Stabs the guy in the back, and the guy just like falls over, and as his body falls, it's the reveal of Tony. Tony's still alive. I didn't see that coming, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I like that twist. Instead of taking forever to untie the gate when Julie's running from Tony, Julie could have easily jumped it, especially because she's basically running for her life in that situation. It just seems so weird that it looked like there was like a wire holding the gate closed. And she slows down and literally stops and is just like taking her time to untie this when she definitely could have jumped that. She wasn't wearing a skirt or anything that would make it that much harder. She could have just jumped that fence. And in her panicked state, I would think she would have done that. She loses a lot of ground stopping to actually open that gate. And like a lot of scenes in this film, Tony chasing Julie goes on way too long, hence the pacing issues. I laughed when Tony was run over by the bulldozer. I do like that moment where he gets run over by the bulldozer. They shot it in a really weird way, like the way the cuts are in it, and like showing his face, he's like, ah, and then showing like just the feet and part of the legs just being rolled over. It's just funny to me. I had to laugh. So that I laughed at, and the dunking scene I laughed at. Those are the only two things I believe I laughed at in the film, and nothing was intended to be laughed at in the film, I'm assuming. So Mary was posing as Julie, and Dave makes a good point about this. How did Tony not notice when he had been married to Mary? The whole idea that Tony is going after who he thinks is Julie, but is actually Mary, and he had been married to Mary, and he doesn't realize that Julie is actually Mary, is ridiculous. I do like the fact that they actually, Dave calls that out as a character in the film, but it's a pretty big plot hole in my opinion, and even with twins, people who have relationships with one of the twins can tell which one is which. Come on. Some crappy writing. But hey, it happens with these films. It really does. So I suppose Mary and Dave live happily ever after with their $1 million diamond in the end. Because obviously the whole point of everything is that Julie, aka Mary, is just trying to get away with this diamond that she's been holding on to and get the money out of it. Dave figures out the situation, and I assume he's basically blackmailing her at that point, because it appears that he's interested in getting a cut of that $1 million diamond, because he's just all about money, not doing the right thing, because he's an attorney, and I believe we're just supposed to expect that attorneys are all scumbags back in these days. That's a bad stereotype, though, I will say. I know it's a long-standing stereotype, but it's a bad one. Because I know some people who are attorneys. I actually have 2 really good friends who are attorneys, and they're good people. They're good people. This film just slowly meanders all over the place. Like I've said a few times, the pacing is garbage. I'm not a fan of this one. This is definitely one of those films I would not watch again. And this one even made me consider stopping going through all these Giallo Realm films and reviewing them. But actually sitting here and doing the review right now, I have a good time doing the review. I do find some enjoyment every now and then in tearing into the ridiculousness and crappiness of some of these films. It's not fun when I'm watching, don't get me wrong, but after the fact, when I get to talk about it, it's a little bit different. But anyway, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, this is a 2-star film. It's between 1.5 and 2 stars, but I'm going to give it 2 stars because, like I was saying, a lot of the technical stuff was pretty good. Plus, Carol Baker and George Hilton are in it, so they are pluses. I like seeing them and stuff, and I think they do a wonderful job. And they had good chemistry together, too. So, 2 stars. Didn't love this one, but would love to hear other people's opinions on it. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Or if you just want to talk about Italian cinema or Giallo or whatever in general, we can do that as well. Do me a quick favor. If you have not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Please do this for me. That is literally your way you can repay me. It is quick, painless, costs you nothing. It's like a second. You just like click. And yeah, it keeps me motivated. I really appreciate that. So that's your way to repay me. Subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new reviews. I've been putting up Italian cinema, usually Giallo or Giallo-esque film reviews every Sunday, but I also put up 3 other videos each week, usually horror related. It's always horror related unless it's one of these Giallo Realm films that ends up falling into that category like this one where it's like crime-ish. Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate that. But regardless, thank you very much for taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.